What is up, book nerds? I am Rachel Bateman, and today I just have one really strong piece of advice for you. That is, if you are wanting to be traditionally published, do not pay for a freelance editor before querying your novel. Don't do it. It is completely unnecessary. It's a cost you do not need to spend, and it is a barrier to people who do not have the disposable income to spend on something like that. I've seen the question pop up in Facebook groups over and over again with more regularity lately. Do I need a professional editor? Do I need to hire a freelance editor before I query? And so many people are saying, yes, absolutely. You have to pay a professional editor before you query your novel, or else you're just not going to make it. The agent is going to reject you every time if you don't pay for an editor. You need a developmental editor to help you shape your story, and you're going to need a copy editor or a proofreader or a line editor to really get it perfect before you query it. Stop. You do not need to spend that money. You do not need to pay an editor before you query your novel. I find that a lot of times the people who are saying you absolutely need to are, one, people who have used a professional editor and it has gone well for them. Or honestly, even if it hasn't gone well for them, they paid $2,000, so they feel like this is what you should do, and they're going to continue to tell you that you need to. Two, people whose only experience with the industry so far is other people telling them they need to pay a professional editor before they query. Or three, freelance editors. A lot of authors are also freelance editors, and I am so sick and tired of seeing freelance editors come up in author groups not disclosing that they are also editors and saying, yes, you need to pay for a professional edit before you query your novel. Yes, you need to pay out this money or you will fail in traditional publishing. That is predatory and is absolutely not okay. I used to be a freelance editor. I also used to be an editor for a small publishing house. I actually turned away people who wanted an edit before querying and told them better routes to take. And I'm not saying this to toot my own horn or to talk about how great I am. My point in this is that I know where these editors are coming from. I was a freelance editor. It is how I put food on my table. I have been there, and I will say that it is a disgusting practice as a freelance editor to slide up into someone's comments without disclosing that you are an editor and say, yes, you have to pay money to traditionally publish. You have to be edited. And then when someone says, okay, do you have any recommendations? Magically, oh, well, you know, I do this. I actually edit. And you know what? You seem like a great person, so I'll give you a discount. I am so sick of seeing this in author groups and these predatory practices. We preach all the time against predatory publishers and agents, and we don't talk about other authors preying on new writers who want to make it in this business. It is a disgusting practice, and I am so sick of seeing it. Okay, sorry, I got a little fired up there about that because it really does irritate me and make me angry to see this. But stepping away from this idea of the predatory editor out there trying to make business, except for one little side note to say that if you are an author/editor and you're saying, hey, I just say that to help them, I'm not trying to be predatory, check yourself, figure it out, and realize that going in and telling someone they absolutely need an editor before querying and then offering your services, I don't care how helpful you're trying to be, that is predatory. Stop doing it. Okay, now really, y'all, I will step away and talk about why you do not need a professional editor before you query. And that is that as a writer, you need to figure out how to make your book good enough without paying someone to do it. Find some good critique partners. These are other authors who you trade manuscripts with and go over and give advice and help them shape their story and do editing. You trade with someone else, so they are going to help you with your book and you help them with theirs. Critique partners are absolutely invaluable. My books would not be anything like what they are without my wonderful critique partner, Ashley. She is like a godsend to my books. But critique partners are free. You don't need to pay them. It is a partnership and you work together. A lot of people will say that if you are a newer author especially, you need a developmental editor to help you really shape a story. And yes, that is a developmental editor's job, to help you shape a story. But you can learn this. You are much better off learning story structure, learning how stories work, really studying your craft and practicing so you can shape a full-fledged story by yourself without having to pay someone. Because when you go into traditional publishing, y'all, There is a team of editors there for you. That is one of the wonderful joys of traditional publishing. They pay the editors. They have them in-house, so you're not having to pay editors. That is part of what you get with your traditional publishing deal. And that is part of why you get a smaller percentage of the profits than you do when you self-publish, because the publisher is paying for these things. There is no sense in you paying for edits if you're going to be traditionally published and your publisher is going to edit your book again anyway. Yes, you do need a polished product before you send it to your agent, but you don't have to pay for that. Study your craft, study grammar, study proofreading, learn, partner with other authors. You can do this for free. Traditional publishing has enough barriers already. You have to find an agent, and that takes time with your querying process and finding an agent who's a good fit for you. Even if you have a wonderful, amazing book, not every agent you query to is going to like it or is going to be a good fit or feel like they can sell it. So there's a barrier trying to get an agent. There is a barrier submitting. There are all kinds of things that play into whether or not a publisher can buy your book. There is absolutely no need to put another barrier to traditional publishing, especially a barrier like paying for an editor, which is a barrier that heavily discriminates against people with lower incomes. People who already are at a disadvantage don't need another barrier to tell them they can't publish. This idea that you need to pay money in order to traditionally publish, it favors the wealthy. It favors those with disposable income. It favors people who are no better writers than those who can't afford it. So stop telling people they have to pay to be traditionally published. The whole point of traditional publishing is that the money flows from the publisher to the author, that the author does not have to pay out in order to get their book out into the world. Now, I will say that if you are going to self-publish, this is a whole different ballgame. As a self-published author, you don't have the backing of a publisher with their in-house editors on board to help shape your book and clean it up. So as a self-published author, hire an editor. Do that. Decide if you need a developmental editor or if your critique partner is enough for that. Definitely hire a copy editor. That is a different world. And I feel like a lot of this idea that you need to hire an editor before querying started to come about as self-publishing became more popular because there were more freelance editors, there were more people hiring freelance editors, and it just kind of bled over into traditional publishing. I've been seeing some people talk about how they've queried an agent and the agent came back and said, hey, you really should have a professional editor look at this before you query. I'm not going to name agent names who do this on YouTube because that's just not okay, but be wary if an agent says you need a professional freelance editor before you query. Many agents have started having side businesses as freelance editors, or they are married or best friends with a freelance editor. And I have noticed that when I ask authors, oh man, an agent told you to get a freelance editor, who was this? Oftentimes it is an agent who also edits. And while they don't say, hey, pick me, pay me, it is a huge conflict of interest for anyone who is an editor to say you have to have an editor in this realm where you do not. So I would take it with a grain of salt if an agent comes back and says you should have a freelance editor. Maybe you do need to clean the book up more. Maybe you need to work deeper with your critique partner or find another critique partner who has different strengths than the one you've been working with. That doesn't necessarily mean get rid of the first critique partner. It's okay to have multiple. Some are very good at the big picture. Some are very good at the more nitty-gritty details. Work with a team of other authors as you trade critiques. But be wary of authors and agents and editors who tell you you have to pay for a professional edit before you can query. It is absolutely not true, and it's just another hurdle to publication that is not necessary. Okay, y'all, thank you for following along with me for this rant. I'm sorry if it was just kind of discombobulated. All this stuff has been swirling in my head and just irritating me to no end as I see more and more authors give this terrible advice. I'm getting worked up about it again already. So I am going to go ahead and wrap up this video. Thank you for watching. I hope I got my message across. I feel like I was pretty clear in this one. I'm usually kind of diplomatic and I could see it both ways, but this I really can't see both ways. I can't. I feel like it's a terrible, terrible bit of advice to tell people to pay for an editor, full stop. So I will be back next week with a video that will be less of a rant. Until then, give me a thumbs up if you like this video. If you have questions or comments, leave them down below. And go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you have not already. I am Rachel Bateman. I will see you next week.